The screen flickered once, twice, and then went black, taking my unsaved work and my patience with it. I stared at the lifeless laptop, muttering curses under my breath, when a voice broke through my frustration. "Trouble in paradise?" I glanced up, and there he was, Ryan, the IT guy, with a lopsided grin that somehow made my spiraling day feel slightly less catastrophic. "It's more like a total meltdown," I sighed, sliding the laptop toward him. "Well," he said, flipping it open with practiced ease, "lucky for you, I specialize in resurrections." I didn't think much of him at first, but then came the emails, clever, teasing, laced with jokes that made me laugh when nothing else could. And then the arcade night, where he let me win just enough to keep it interesting. But now, as the past claws its way back into my carefully rebuilt world, I wonder if it's too good to last. Can I really trust him, or am I just waiting for the inevitable crash? When my laptop made a series of ominous beeps, flickered, and abruptly went black, it felt like the final straw. Deadlines loomed like a guillotine, and now my lifeline to work had betrayed me. I jabbed the power button repeatedly, a futile attempt to will it back to life. Nothing. A groan escaped my lips as I cradled my head in my hands. "Perfect," I muttered, glaring at the inert machine. Just what I needed. After a quick, half-hearted search online for repair services using my phone, I dialed the first number that seemed reputable. I wasn't in the mood for thorough research. I just needed someone to fix this mess. "Hi, this is Ryan from Digital Fixers. How can I help you?" A cheery voice answered. His tone was too bright for someone who hadn't faced a tech disaster this morning. I explained the problem in clipped sentences, my irritation barely hidden. "No worries," Ryan said, his voice undeterred by my mood. "I'll swing by in about an hour." "Sound good?" I hesitated. Did I really want a stranger tinkering with my computer in my home? But what choice did I have? "Fine," I said reluctantly. Exactly 59 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a young man in his mid-20s standing on the porch, holding a small toolkit. His short, messy brown hair seemed to defy gravity, and a pair of glasses perched crookedly on his nose. He was wearing a plain gray hoodie and jeans, the universal tech uniform. "Jessica," he asked, flashing a lopsided grin. "I am Ryan, your tech savior for the day." I stepped aside to let him in, already regretting my decision. "Wow," he said, spotting the dead laptop on my desk. "This poor guy has seen better days." "It's not a guy," I corrected before I could stop myself. "And it's barely a year old." He chuckled as he knelt by the desk. "My apologies, ma'am. I'll treat her with the utmost respect." His easy demeanor was disarming. Against my better judgment, I found myself relaxing as he opened his toolkit and got to work. "So," he said, glancing up at me, "what did you do to her?" "Spill coffee. Drop her. Use her as a frisbee." "Very funny," I deadpanned. "It just shut off." 1 minute it was working, and the next nothing. "Classic case of user neglect," he said, his voice teasing. "Don't worry. I am here to save the day." I folded my arms and leaned against the wall, trying not to smile. "You're awfully confident for someone who hasn't even opened it yet. Confidence is half the battle." He winked, and I rolled my eyes, determined not to encourage him. For the next 20 minutes, Ryan worked in silence, occasionally muttering to himself about loose wires and corrupted drives. I watched him from the corner of the room, trying not to be obvious. There was something strangely captivating about the way he worked, focused yet relaxed, as if he had all the time in the world. "There we go," he said finally, straightening up. "It's not perfect, but it should boot up now." I crossed the room and hovered behind him as he pressed the power button. The screen lit up, and I felt a surge of relief. "You're a miracle worker," I said, unable to keep the gratitude out of my voice. He spun around in the chair, grinning. "Told you I'd save the day." I smirked. "Don't let it go to your head." "Too late," he said, tapping his temple. "I am already a legend in my own mind." As much as I hated to admit it, his humor was growing on me. "So what do I owe you?" I asked, pulling out my wallet. He waved a hand dismissively. "We'll email you the invoice. For now, just promise to treat your laptop with love and care." "Deal," I said, smiling despite myself. As he packed up his tools, he hesitated. "By the way, if you ever need help with tech stuff or want to hear more of my terrible jokes, just call." I laughed. I'll keep that in mind. He left with a cheerful goodbye, and I closed the door, shaking my head. I hadn't expected my morning to be derailed by a broken laptop or brightened by a cheerful IT guy. If only I had known how much more derailed and complicated it was about to get. The next morning, I sat at my desk, fingers poised over my now functional laptop. My deadline loomed closer, but instead of diving into work, I found myself replaying yesterday's conversation with Ryan. His jokes, his easy smile, and the way he managed to draw me out of my tech-induced funk stuck in my head. "Get it together, Jess," I muttered, forcing myself to focus on my screen. I opened my email and began typing a response to my boss. But before I could finish, an email notification popped up. Subject: hope all systems are a go. It was from Ryan. I clicked it, expecting an invoice, but the content caught me off guard. "Hey Jessica, just checking in to make sure the laptop is running smoothly. Also, I realized I left a screwdriver behind, or at least, I hope I did otherwise. IV officially lost it. Let me know if it's there. P.S. If you're looking for a break from work, here's a fun fact: the first computer bug was an actual moth trapped in a relay. Wild, right? Cheers, Ryan." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. I glanced around the room, spotting a small, flathead screwdriver on the edge of the desk. "Guess he's not losing his mind," I murmured, fingers hovering over the keyboard as I debated how to respond. Finally, I typed, "Hi Ryan, thanks for checking in. The laptop seems to be working perfectly, and yes, your screwdriver is here. Feel free to swing by whenever it's convenient to grab it. P.S. I didn't know about the moth. I'll admit that it's a pretty good one. Best, Jessica." I hit send and immediately felt ridiculous. Why did I add the bit about the moth? Now I sounded like I cared about his random trivia. I shook my head and turned my attention back to my work. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text. "Hey, Jessica, thanks for the reply. I'll swing by later today for the screwdriver if that works for you. Also, there's plenty more trivia where that came from." I stared at the message, torn between rolling my eyes and laughing. Who was this guy, and why did he seem so interested in striking up a conversation? "Sure," I typed back. "Just let me know when you're coming." That afternoon, the doorbell rang again. When I opened it, Ryan stood there holding a takeout cup. "Hey," he said, handing it to me with a grin. "I figured I owed you coffee for the inconvenience yesterday. Hope you like lattes." I blinked at him, caught off guard. Thanks." He stepped inside, spotting his screwdriver on the desk. "There's the culprit." "Hardly a culprit," I said, holding up the coffee. "You bribed me with caffeine just to get it back." "Guilty as charged," he replied, his grin widening. As he lingered near the desk, I realized he was waiting for me to say something. To my surprise, I found myself asking, "So, do you actually have more trivia, or was that a bluff?" His eyes lit up. "Oh, I have plenty. Did you know that the first email ever sent was by a guy named Ray Tomlinson to himself? He basically invented email just to say hi." I laughed. "That can be true. Google it," he said with a shrug. "I didn't make the rules, just spread the knowledge." What was supposed to be a quick drop-off turned into a half-hour conversation. Somehow, we veered from tech history to favorite movies, then to music. I learned Ryan was originally from Portland and moved to Seattle for work a year ago. He was passionate about coding, hated pineapple on pizza, and thought karaoke was the greatest invention of the 20th century. "And what about you?" he asked, leaning casually against the desk. "Me," I said, startled by the shift. "Yeah, what's your deal? Apart from having terrible luck with laptops." I hesitated, unsure how much to share. "I am a freelance copywriter." "Pretty boring, honestly." "Boring?" He gave me a skeptical look. "You seem anything but boring." I rolled my eyes, but his words lingered. After he left, I sat down with the coffee he brought, staring at the swirl of foam on top. I should have been focused on my looming deadlines, but instead, my thoughts were consumed by Ryan. Was this just friendly banter? Or was there something more to his easy smiles and lingering conversations? I wasn't sure, but for the first time in a while, I didn't mind not knowing. The days that followed felt lighter, though I refused to acknowledge why. My work had picked up momentum, The laptop performed without a hitch, and Ryan's email, system success stories, nestled in my inbox, offered another excuse to smile. Hope the latte boosted productivity. Just remember, if you need tech help or terrible jokes, you know where to find me. Cheers, Ryan. Didn't he reply immediately? What would I even say? Thanks for the coffee and casual charm that I can stop thinking about. Probably not. Still, his message sat there like an unopened gift, tempting me every time I logged in. It was late on a rainy Thursday when I saw his name flash across my phone. Ryan, hey, Jessica. Weird question, but are you into retro arcade games? There's a pop-up opening tomorrow. Thought of you for some reason. The rain drummed against the window as I stared at the text. Retro arcade games? It felt random, but also like the perfect mix of nostalgic and ridiculous. Against my better judgment, I responded. I am intrigued. Are you secretly a Pac-Man champion or just looking for an excuse to lose at Frogger? Ryan, you on. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Prepare to be amazed by my mediocre skills and excellent commentary. His confidence made me laugh, but a flicker of nerves crept in. Was this a date? It didn't feel like one, but it also didn't feel not like one. The pop-up arcade was tucked into a dimly lit corner of a downtown bar, its neon signs casting a nostalgic glow. Ryan was waiting outside, hands stuffed into his jacket pockets, his grin breaking wide when he saw me. Hey, he said, holding the door open. Ready for some serious button mashing? I nodded, trying to hide my nervousness. Only if you were ready to lose. Inside, the space buzzed with energy, flashing screens, electronic chimes, and the low hum of laughter and conversation. Ryan led the way to a Pac-Man machine, tossing a token into the slot with practiced ease. Let us see what you've got, he challenged, stepping aside so I could take the controls. I wasn't terrible, but Ryan's playful commentary made it hard to concentrate. Watch out, you cornered. No, oh ouch, that's tragic. Are you going to help or just narrate my demise? I shot back, glaring at him over my shoulder. He held up his hands in mock surrender. Hey, I am here for moral support. His teasing was infectious, and before long, we were battling it out on Street Fighter and laughing over a disastrously failed attempt at Dance Dance Revolution. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had so much fun doing something so simple. Afterward, we sat in a corner booth with greasy fries and milkshakes, our post-game high fading into something quieter. So, Ryan said, dipping a fry into his shake, what made you go freelance? That's a bold move. I shrugged, swirling my straw in the thick vanilla shake. I needed a change. My old job felt suffocating. He nodded, his expression softening. That makes sense. It's brave, though, starting over like that. Brave or stupid, I said with a wry smile. Definitely brave, he countered, his tone sincere. For a moment, the noise around us faded, and I felt myself leaning into the warmth of his words. Then he cleared his throat, breaking the spell. You've got some serious arcade skills, by the way. Better than I expected. Was that a compliment? I teased. Don't get used to it, he replied, grinning. By the time I got home, my cheeks ached from smiling. I sank onto the couch, clutching my phone as I scrolled through our last few texts. It was getting harder to convince myself this was just friendly banter. Still, I wasn't sure what to do with the possibility that Ryan might like me or worse, that I might like him back. The days blurred together, but Ryan's texts became a constant, a bright thread woven into the monotony of work and solitude. Sometimes it was trivia, did you know a group of porcupines is called a prickle? And other times it was a simple, how's your day going? But every message left me smiling longer than I cared to admit. One evening, after a grueling day of revisions for a picky client, I found myself staring at my phone, debating whether to text him first. It felt juvenile, this uncertainty, but the thought of hearing from him was more tempting than my pride. Before I could overthink, my phone buzzed with perfect timing. Ryan, hey, you busy? I've got a joke, but it only works if you re-near your laptop. I raised an eyebrow at the screen, intrigued. This better be worth it. What's the setup? Ryan, step 1, open your laptop. Step 2, read this out loud. Why did the computer keep freezing? I read the words under my breath as I powered on the screen. Before I could finish the punchline, A notification popped up. Ryan was calling me. Hello. I answered, surprised, because it left its windows open. He said triumphantly, his voice light and playful. I groaned. That's terrible. You laughed, he countered, his tone smug. Don't deny it, you're ridiculous. And you needed a laugh, he said, his voice softening. I paused, taken aback by his sincerity. Yeah, I admitted, I did. There was a beat of silence, warm and unspoken, before he spoke again. You doing okay? You sound tired. I am fine, I said quickly. Just work stuff, you know how it is. Not really, he teased. I am one of those people who genuinely loves their job, remember? Must be nice, I said, trying to sound annoyed, but the laughter in my voice betrayed me. It is. But hey, maybe we should find something to remind you why you love yours. Inspiration field trip. I blinked at the suggestion. What's an inspiration field trip? I don't know, he admitted, laughing. But I think we should figure it out. Maybe a bookstore, or somewhere that smells like coffee and creativity. Something in his voice, the playful, yet earnest mix, made it impossible to say no. Okay, I said slowly. You've got my attention. When's this field trip happening? How's tomorrow? The next day, Ryan picked me up in his aging Toyota Corolla, the dashboard cluttered with coffee cups and phone chargers. It was the kind of car that spoke to someone who valued function over form, and somehow, it suited him perfectly. He drove us to a cozy little bookstore cafe tucked into a quiet corner of the city. The air smelled like freshly brewed coffee and old pages, and I felt a pang of something close to happiness as we stepped inside. You've got to love a place where you can get caffeine and enlightenment in one go, he said, holding the door for me. I laughed. You're such a dork. Guilty, he said, unbothered. We wandered the shelves, pointing out ridiculous book titles and sharing snippets of stories that caught our eye. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the simple joy of being in the moment with someone who made me forget everything else. At one point, Ryan disappeared, only to return with a book in hand. What's that? I asked, eyeing the cover. It's a surprise, he said, holding it out to me, but I think you'll like it. I took it, scanning the title letters to a young writer by Colum McCann. Ryan, I trailed off, unsure what to say. I thought it might help, he said, scratching the back of his neck. You know, with finding that inspiration. For a moment, all I could do was stare at him. His thoughtfulness caught me completely off guard. Thank you, I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. His grin was shy but proud. No problem. Now let us get some coffee before you make this awkward. We spent hours in that little cafe, sipping lattes and talking about everything and nothing. By the time we left, the sun had dipped below the horizon and a cool breeze swept through the streets. Ryan walked me to my door, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. So, he said, rocking on his heels, did the field trip work? Feeling inspired yet? I held up the book, smiling. It helped. Good. He hesitated, his gaze holding mine for a beat longer than usual. I am glad. Me too, I said softly. For a moment it felt like he might say something else, but instead he just smiled and said goodnight. As I closed the door behind him, I pressed my back against it, clutching the book to my chest. Whatever this was, this thing between us, it was growing. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend I didn't feel it too. The following weeks felt like living in a bubble of unexpected warmth. Ryan and I fell into an unspoken rhythm, texts that turned into calls, spontaneous coffee dates, and hours spent laughing about everything from failed college pranks to the absurdity of reality TV. But for every moment of ease, there was a flicker of hesitation. I couldn't ignore the voice in my head warning me to slow down, to keep my guard up. I had learned the hard way that letting someone in could lead to cracks that weren't easily mended. The bubble burst on a rainy Friday afternoon. I had just finished a meeting with a particularly difficult client and was scrolling through my phone while waiting for a late lunch delivery. When a notification from an unfamiliar number appeared, I almost ignored it. Unknown number. Hey, Jess. Long time no talk. Ran into your sister yesterday. Thought I'd check in. Hope you're doing okay. My stomach dropped. The message was from Eric, my ex. Seeing his name sent a rush of memories flooding back, whispered promises, the slow unraveling of trust, and the final, bitter conversation that left me reeling. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to respond or delete the message altogether. Before I could decide, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Ryan. Ryan, hey, you free tonight? Found this trivia night downtown that screams Jessica will destroy everyone. Drinks on me if you win. The timing was almost cruel. I wanted to say yes, to let Ryan S. lightheartedness pull me away from the shadows Eric S. text had stirred. But my chest felt heavy, and the thought of pretending everything was fine seemed impossible. Me not tonight. Work stuff. Rain check. His reply came quickly, Ryan, sure thing. Don't work too hard. I stared at his message, guilt prickling at the edges of my thoughts. Didn't he deserve this, the distance I was suddenly putting between us? But I couldn't shake the feeling that my past was a wall I wasn't ready to let him climb. The following day, Ryan surprised me with a visit. He showed up at my door holding a bag of pastries from my favorite bakery and a sheepish grin. Thought you might need a Saturday pick-me-up. I tried to summon my usual enthusiasm but failed miserably. Thanks, I said, stepping aside to let him in. He set the bag on the counter and turned to me, his expression softening. Okay, what's going on? Nothing, I said too quickly. Jess, he said, his voice gentle but firm, I can tell something's bothering you. You don't have to talk about it, but you don't have to deal with it alone either. The sincerity in his eyes nearly undid me. For a moment, I considered telling him everything about Eric, the betrayal, the lingering doubts that I'd never quite shaken. But the words caught in my throat. It's just work, I lied, averting my gaze. I've been a little overwhelmed lately. Ryan studied me for a long moment before nodding. Okay, he said finally. But you can tell me if it's more than that, right? I know, I said, forcing a smile. He push further, instead pulling out the pastries and insisting I try one of the chocolate croissants. His effort to lighten the mood was endearing, and I found myself laughing despite the storm brewing inside me. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about Ryan's kindness, his patience, and the way he seemed to genuinely care about me despite the walls I kept putting up. I wanted to let him in, to trust that he wouldn't break me the way Eric had. But trust wasn't something I gave easily anymore. Before I could drift off to sleep, my phone buzzed with another message from Eric. Eric, I get it if you don't want to talk, but I meant what I said. I am sorry for how things ended. I'd like to make it right if I can. I stared at the screen, torn between anger and an ache I couldn't quite name. It wasn't fair, this intrusion into the life I was finally starting to rebuild. Without thinking, I deleted the message and turned off my phone, trying to silence the emotions swirling in my chest. As I lay in the dark, I realized the glitch wasn't in my laptop or even in the past I'd tried to leave behind. It was in me. And I had no idea how to fix it. Sunday came and went in a blur of distraction. I cleaned the apartment, reorganized my bookshelf, and even attempted to bake banana bread, anything to avoid confronting the growing weight in my chest. But avoidance only worked for so long, and by Monday morning, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Eric's messages lingered like static in the back of my mind, each one pulling me further from the calm I'd been rebuilding. And then there was Ryan, kind, funny, persistent Ryan, whose texts now sat unanswered in my phone. Just tell him the truth, I muttered to myself, though the idea felt impossible. What truth? That my ex had resurfaced, dredging up wounds I hadn't fully healed from, that I was scared of letting someone else in, even someone as easy to be around as Ryan. The thoughts followed me into the week, their weight building with each passing day. By Wednesday, I knew I couldn't keep avoiding Ryan without it becoming obvious. Hey, he said when I answered his call that evening. His voice was warm, but I could hear the question beneath it. Hey, I replied, twisting a strand of hair between my fingers. Are we still on for tomorrow? Dinner at that taco place you mentioned? I hesitated, my stomach twisting with guilt. About that there was a beat of silence. You recanceling, guarantee you. I am sorry, I said quickly, hating the disappointment I heard in his tone. Something came up. Jess, he said softly, is everything okay? I am fine, I lied, the words tasting bitter. You don't sound fine, he said, and I could hear the concern in his voice. If I am pushing too hard, or if I've done something, no, I interrupted, my chest tightening. You haven't done anything. It's me. I am dealing with some stuff, and I don't know how to talk about it. Ryan was quiet for a moment, and I braced myself for him to push for answers I wasn't ready to give. But instead, he said, okay. Okay, I echoed, caught off guard. Yeah, he said, his voice steady. I am not going to force you to tell me anything you're not ready to share, but I am here when you are. No pressure. His understanding was disarming, and for a moment I considered telling him everything. But the words stayed lodged in my throat, too tangled with fear to come out. Thank you, I said quietly. Anytime, he replied, his tone lightening. But just so you know, you're missing out on the best tacos in the city. Your loss, I laughed despite myself. Rain check. Always, he said, and I could hear his smile through the phone. That night, I replayed our conversation over and over in my head. Ryan's patience, his willingness to give me space, it should have made me feel better. Instead, it made the walls I'd built around myself feel even more fragile. I stared at my laptop screen, the cursor blinking on an empty document. My client's project was due in 2 days, and I hadn't written a single word. The stress of it all work, Eric. Ryan pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. Before I could think better of it, I opened my email and typed out a short response to Eric. Eric, I am not sure what you're looking for, but I don't think this is a good idea. Please don't contact me again. Jessica, I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The relief immediate but short-lived. The damage had already been done. Eric's messages had reopened a part of me I thought I'd buried, and now I was left to sort through the wreckage. The next morning, Ryan sent me a photo of his coffee cup with the caption needed extra caffeine since someone ditched me last night. I'll forgive you eventually. I smiled at the message, my heart aching with the realization of just how much I cared about him. But caring about Ryan also meant being honest with him, and that meant facing a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to share. Days passed, each one more difficult to navigate than the last. Ryan's patience remained steady, his messages light and playful, though I could sense the subtle thread of worry in his tone. My replies were curt, polite, and devoid of the humor we once shared. I hated how distant I'd become, but the thought of explaining everything to unravel the tangled mess inside me felt impossible. By Friday, I decided it was time to do something, even if I wasn't sure what. I spent the morning pacing my apartment, debating whether to text Ryan and meet him, when the decision was made for me. As I rounded the corner near my kitchen, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Ryan. Hey, Jess, random, but I am grabbing coffee near your place. Wanna join? I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. This wasn't a coincidence. He was reaching out, meeting me halfway because he knew I was slipping further away. Me sure. Where are you? He replied with the name of a small cafe a few blocks away, and before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my coat and headed out the door. Ryan was sitting by the window, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup when I walked in. He looked up, his face lighting up with a smile that sent a pang of guilt through me. Hey, he said, standing to greet me. You made it. Yeah, I said, managing a small smile as I slid into the seat across from him. He studied me for a moment, his expression soft but unreadable. How've you been? I am okay, I said automatically, then winced at the lie. Actually, I am not okay. Ryan set his cup down, leaning forward slightly. I figured, he said gently. Want to talk about it? I took a deep breath, my hands twisting in my lap. It's just things from my past. Stuff I thought I'd moved on from. He didn't press, just waited, giving me the space I needed to find the words. My ex, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. He has been messaging me. Ryan's expression shifted, the light humor in his eyes replaced by quiet understanding. That's a lot to deal with, he said carefully. Has he been bothering you? No, I said quickly. He apologized, said he wanted to make things right. And how do you feel about that? I hesitated, my chest tightening. Confused, angry, sad, I guess. It's hard to explain. You don't have to explain, Ryan said, his voice steady. It makes sense. Someone hurt you and now they trying to come back. That's a lot to process. His words struck a chord, and before I knew it, I was spilling everything the way Eric had betrayed my trust, how it had taken me years to rebuild my confidence, and how his sudden reappearance had thrown me completely off balance. When I finally stopped, Ryan was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I am sorry you went through that," he said finally. "You didn't deserve it." The sincerity in his voice made my throat tighten. "Thank you," I whispered. "And for the record," he added, a small smile tugging at his lips, "I think you're a lot stronger than you give yourself credit for." We spent hours at the cafe, talking about everything and nothing. For the first time in weeks, I felt lighter, as though sharing the weight of my emotions had eased the burden. When we finally stepped outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Ryan walked me home, his presence warm and steady beside me. As we reached my door, I hesitated, turning to face him. "Ryan," I said softly, "thank you. For everything. You don't have to thank me," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "I am just glad you trusted me enough to let me in." For a moment, I thought he might lean in, and my heart raced at the possibility. But instead, he gave me a small, reassuring smile and stepped back. "Get some rest," he said. "I'll see you soon." I watched him walk away, a mixture of relief and longing swirling in my chest. Whatever this was between us, it wasn't simple. But for the first time, I felt ready to face it, whatever it might become. The next few days felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind tugging me forward and back in equal measure. Ryan's steady presence had become a lifeline, but I couldn't shake the fear that letting him in meant risking another fracture in my already fragile heart. But something shifted that week. Maybe it was his patience, his unwavering kindness, or the way he didn't push for more than I could give. Or maybe it was the realization that I couldn't keep holding on to the past and expect to move forward. By Friday evening, I made a decision. I called Ryan just as the sun was setting, the golden light streaming through my window making me feel braver than I had in years. "Hey," he answered, his voice warm and familiar. "What's up? Are you free tonight?" I asked, my heart pounding. "For you." "Always," he said, the playful tone in his voice sending a small smile to my lips. "Meet me at the bookstore cafe?" "Give me 30 minutes," he said, already sounding like he was moving. When I arrived, Ryan was already waiting, leaning against the cafe's doorway with his hands in his jacket pockets. He straightened when he saw me, his grin easy and familiar. "Hey," he said, his eyes searching mine. "What's this about?" I hesitated, taking a deep breath before gesturing inside. "Come on, I'll explain." We found a small table by the window, the hum of conversation around us providing a comforting backdrop. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, willing the words to come. "Ryan," I started, meeting his gaze. "I owe you an apology." His brow furrowed. "For what?" "For pushing you away," I said, my voice trembling. "I've been scared. Of getting hurt again. Of trusting someone and having it fall apart." His expression softened and he reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. "Jess, I get it. You don't have to explain, but I want to," I interrupted, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Because you've been so patient with me, and you deserve to know the truth." I told him everything, the fear, the guilt, the way Eric's messages had reopened wounds I thought had healed. And through it all, Ryan listened, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finally finished, I felt lighter, as though I'd shed a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. "I am sorry," I said quietly, "for shutting you out." Ryan shook his head, his grip on my hand tightening. "Don't apologize for protecting yourself, Jess, but I want you to know something." He leaned forward, his voice steady and sure. "I am not him, and I am not going anywhere unless you tell me to." "Okay." The tears came before I could stop them, and Ryan stood, moving to my side of the table and pulling me into his arms. For the first time in years, I felt safe. We spent the rest of the evening talking. The weight of unspoken fears finally lifted. Ryan told me about his own doubts and struggles, the moments when he wondered if he was pushing too hard or reading too much into our connection. "You weren't," I said softly. "You saw me better than I saw myself." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Well, somebody had to." Over the next few weeks, something between us shifted. The cracks in my walls began to mend, not because they were ignored, but because Ryan helped me face them. I told him more about my past, my dreams, my fears, the parts of me I'd kept hidden. And in return, he gave me honesty, patience, and a kind of unwavering support I hadn't known I needed. Eric's messages eventually stopped, and though his reappearance had shaken me, it also gave me clarity. He was a closed chapter, a lesson learned, but not one I needed to revisit. Ryan, on the other hand, was something entirely different, a new beginning. One night, as we sat together on my couch, my laptop open between us, Ryan turned to me with a grin. "So," he said, "what's the verdict? Is this thing officially fixed?" I laughed, nudging him with my elbow. "It has been fixed for weeks, thanks to you." "Then I guess my work here is done," he teased, leaning back with a satisfied smirk. "Not quite," I said, turning to face him. "I think you restuck with me for a while longer." His smile softened and he reached for my hand. "Good," he said simply, "because I am not going anywhere." For the first time in a long time, I believed it.